Breaking news in the NFL, the Texans expected to hire Lovie Smith as their next head coach. That confirmed by our insiders, Josina Anderson and Jonathan Jones. Smith was on that staff. Smith was the defensive coordinator for the Texans last year under David Culley, who was fired after one season. Lovie Smith, head coach with the Bears and Bucks, and now appears that he will be the head coach of the Houston Texans as well. And that will leave just one coaching vacancy now, the New Orleans Saints. So everything has been covered with Lovie Smith, likely to replace David Culley now in Houston. What happens with the Saints and Sean Payton, who is stepping away from coaching? All right, let's break it down with Josina Anderson, who helped break this news, and Pete Prisco here. I'm Chris Hassel, coming to you live from Los Angeles, site of the Super Bowl, but other things taking precedence right now. Boy, if you took a 3-day slumber, you'd be really surprised to learn that the Texans were going with Lovie Smith as head coach. How did we get here, Josina?
Well, originally they started off with the three candidates, and Josh McCown, Jonathan Gannon, and Brian Flores. And that is what was stated to me definitively from a team source, who also stated that they were going through the process of reviewing all of those candidates and all of their staffs to make sure that they were viable, that they were available, and that they could fit. Now, part of that, I think, is what contributed to Jonathan Gannon not being there, though, you know, you can talk to people in Philadelphia and the Eagles fans, and they'll give you all their opinions about Jonathan Gannon. Nonetheless, you know, per source, multiple sources, they told him he was not a part of their search anymore. That left Brian Flores, and that also left Josh McCown. Now, Pete, we know that there's a very big difference between the experience levels of both of those last men that I just talked about. So from an optics position for the Houston Texans, how do you quantify that, no matter how well you feel about Josh McCown, right? So I'm sure that there were a lot of discussions behind the scenes between Park Avenue, between the Houston Texans, ownership, and all that other stuff, though Brian Flores definitively has affinity in that building. You cannot dispute his Patriot ties, right? Mm-hmm. So that obviously leaves other circumstances, whether it be the lawsuit, whether it be Cal McNair's comfort with this, and his, his being a part of the ownership around the league, right? Those are all things that I think you don't need to spell out. They just are what they are. So nonetheless, we had the report coming from NFL Network last night that Lovie Smith interviewed for the first time formally, even though he has been with the Texans as a defensive coordinator just yesterday, and now we have accelerated, Pete.
Well, I mean, look,
him being expected to be finalized
I don't know
coach.
Which was a worse search, what Jacksonville did or what the Texans have done. Both of them have kind of botched the search in terms of how they handled it, not to the end result. Mm-hmm. Because I think Doug Peterson will be a good coach in Jacksonville, and Lovie Smith is a good football coach. I mean, he won at Chicago. At Tampa, there was you hear rumblings of backroom maneuvering that kind of helped undo him in Tampa.
Didn't win at Illinois either.
No. Well, who's going to win at Illinois? Give me a break. But no, he's a good football coach. So is he the best candidate for the job? Hard to say. I mean, look at their group of candidates. Gannon, limited experience. You know, Brian Flores has the lawsuit and the trust of his ownership. You know, that's a big issue. I said it earlier. That's a big issue. He broke the trust of his ownership. And if you're hiring a guy, that's got to be a concern. And so I think there were issues. And you mentioned it. Josh McCown doesn't have any experience. So in the end, they go to Lovie Smith, who's been a head coach. And I think it's probably, you look at it, it's probably the right time. It's a bad team right now. The roster's not good. They got to hope that they get their quarterback back. It's not a good team right now.
And I think it's a fair discussion, because what Pete is bringing up about the loss of trust, you know, is a fair point, right? No, everyone wants, especially as an insider, right? Everything is based on trust when you're having conversations off the record and things happen. We get that. I think the flip side of this, though, is why. Because that's also an equal and valid conversation as to what I think is even more mitigating circumstances that led to his, ultimate decision to file this lawsuit. So it's like you have that conversation, but I don't think you can have that without also discussing the why. And not only that, but just the position that Brian Flores, although other coaches haven't necessarily taken taken it to this extent, you know, the fact that he had to reach to this point of feeling based on his experience, we can always, you know, debate the merits and the substance and the accuracy, but getting to the point where he had to be at this point, I think is, you know, unfortunate in and of itself. And then the last point that I will make about that is just that as people have been talking about this Brian Flores lawsuit, since obviously, you know, the filing of that has ultimately somewhat led us here too, right? Is the conversation of people talking about the consequences of filing the lawsuit. You hear people putting that in the atmosphere. Well, you know, definitely gonna, you know, not be able to continue in the NFL. And that came from Brian Flores himself. But I do think it is worthy to note that just even verbalizing that over and over again, I think participates in embedding that in, you know, like the consciousness of society where it's expected, as opposed to focusing on what should be the positive outcome of challenging concerns, you know, to the betterment of everything. You know what I mean? That's
but
all.
Josina, there's two different issues here.
Right.
The issue of him not getting a head coaching job and filing this lawsuit is a good thing. I mean, he's got to try and pave the way for others. I get it. Yeah. I think it's a great thing. But the other issue is the allegation of being paid to tank games. You better have receipts for that. And that's what I talk about, the trust. If the owner, like, flippantly said that once or twice, and we don't know if he did or not, then now that's out in the universe. Then that trust between owner and coach, and he's not his coach anymore, but when you look at it from the surface, if I'm hiring this guy, can I trust him if I bring him in my building? They're two different things, I think.
Well, I don't know if he's got some secret recording or
better.
a smoking gun, or there's a report from NFL Network saying there was a witness, you know, that heard this. I don't know, but I hear your point.
If he doesn't go forward with the lawsuit, if he doesn't make all that public, does he get the Houston Texans job?
Well, you cannot dismiss his the affinity that he has in that building. There are people at high levels who really, and that is true, authentic. I know people even question it when I said that he was a finalist. That is true. That is 100% true. So then the question becomes, why didn't he get the job when you're looking at his record as head coach? Now, they started off not great. But, you know, Brian Flores' team have tended to finish strong. So you can't, just ignore that, right? And so then if that component exists, then what are the components that made them not go in his direction? And that's why I said personally I'm curious. If I had the opportunity as a journalist, I would love to be able to ask and know what is Cal McNair's position on Brian Flores? What is Cal McNair's position as an owner relative to how the other owners feel because he's filed this lawsuit? And also, I think the other component that hasn't really been discussed, because it is true and it was emphasized to me by the sources, about just the absolute need for the staffs to fit. The staffs had to fit in terms of who they were naming would be their offensive coordinator, whatever, and willingness to work with present staff on the staff. So I don't know if Brian Flores was going to be willing to work with Josh McCown, his thoughts about, keeping Lovie or people that are highly regarded in that building. So you have to think that with Lovie there, I would assume that Josh McCown would be a part of the staff. I don't know yet, but
I think Brian Flores is a good football coach, and I think he's going to be a good football coach again because he'll coach again. But let's put the reality out there. He didn't go to the playoffs in Miami, not once, and his record was one game different than Adam Gase, who also got fired and went to the playoffs. I mean, he got fired for a reason, and there were issues inside the building with him and the general manager. We know that. We've heard that. And so I think there are issues out there. Brian Flores will coach again, and he will be a good coach again. Sometimes,
a head coach?
Yes. I think sometimes it comes back around again. And I really believe he will coach again. That's just my gut feeling.
Really?
Yep.
So what feeds that optimism, do you feel like?
Because, we'll see how the legal situation plays out, but I think he'll coach again. I just do.
No, that's good.
If you were to tell the Houston Texans several weeks ago, a month ago, that all this was going to happen, you think they just would have stayed put with David Culley?
Oh, that's a really good question. Because, to end up, letting David Culley go before the expiration of his contract, to then only end up with an internal candidate who's been there this whole time. It's not like Lovie Smith just appeared as defensive coordinator. And, oh, by the way, we've been talking to Lovie Smith all along. Yes, but the question is, when did it become a formal interview? It's not that you've had conversations and keeping him on the side and checking in or what have you. That's not what we're talking about. There's a difference between having a formal interview, going through the process as also monitored by the Fritz Pollard Alliance and all these other things that have to happen relative to that. Now, Now, if they got some receipts on some other dates we don't know about, great, then what have you. But for what we know, what's been reported, even by other networks, it was yesterday. So, listen, David Culley still got 4 wins, even with that roster. We'll see, what Lovie Smith can do as far as the offensive component, especially if Pep Hamilton stays there. But I don't know. You asked me, I think that they wanted to have David Culley there and eventually move on.
Yeah, I would have kept David Culley. They played hard at the end of the year. They really did.
They were feisty.
Yeah, they were. And you know what? That's usually a testament to the coach. I would have kept him around.
Okay, Josina, the obvious next question is, what's going on with Deshaun Watson? What's the latest there?
So Deshaun Watson is obviously going to be a very, very hot commodity by the start of the new league year, assuming that he can get this resolved with his lawsuit. It's not like people are not going to need quarterbacks, and it's not like he, lost his talent over this time. I think that what I definitely know that has been repeated to me very, very often is that it's never been Deshaun Watson's preference or desire to settle these cases, nor has that been the case in his camp. So I don't know how you arrive at a conclusion absent of that. And I heard just 2 days ago from a source connected is that they still have not received the date on the formation of the grand jury. And so that actually makes things very curious relative to the timeline that I'm talking about with the start of the new league year, March 16th. So if that's not the case, and all of those owners concerns were present beforehand, that being David Tepper, that being, Ross, this is why the Broncos stayed away, then obviously those concerns are going to linger over into the new year. So, absent of, settling, and then you still have the criminal component. Look, the possibility is that, and this was told to me even beforehand, that if you're going to fully litigate this out, all the way through, this could go into 2 years. At some point, an owner has to say to themselves, are they comfortable with that just hanging over your head, knowing that at some point it's going to have a definitive end date? It's going to end at some point. Look how long Brady has been playing in his career, 44 going on 45. So at some point, you're going to have this quarterback. Just speaking about football, obviously there's serious things that are going out there. From a football standpoint, he will be available, and you have to ask yourself, are you okay with doing that while this is pending? And however.
And the answer to that question is absolutely not.
Okay, tell me.
No chance in hell do you trade for him if he has the pending legal issues hanging over his head. No way.
So what if that doesn't get fully adjudicated for 2 years, including the criminal?
Then he's going to be sitting on the sidelines then.
That is a valuable football commodity to have sitting there.
But the least of his concerns, if it goes to a criminal case, should be his football life. Seriously. Now, we don't know what happened. Nobody does. That's why you play it out. But with this hanging over him, I can't imagine a team will trade for him in this scenario as is right now, particularly if they haven't convened the grand jury.
And when you talk to, Rusty Hardin and his representation, they express, very strong confidence that, he will not have a situation that will linger. Obviously, that still has to bear out. But,
But that's his attorney. Of course he's going to say that.
Rusty Hardin has a good record, though.
He does.
He does
have a good record.
And not to make, light of it or what have you. Obviously, the women that have brought their concerns up, should be taken seriously, and all of that stuff should be vetted and adjudicated, what have you. All I'm saying is strictly from a football standpoint that eventually all of these things will have a expiration date, and thereafter, if you have the opportunity, especially with the beginning of the new league year, to acquire Deshaun Watson, is it worth it? There have been quarterbacks and players who've been through a lot of things on tape in this National Football League, from the Joe Mixons to the Kareem Hunts. You can talk about Adrian Peterson, Michael Vick, all of these players. And a lot of them have fought back to still participate in the league. So eventually, some of these things, conclude, and then you have to determine as an owner if you're okay with that.
And for the Texans, Pete, you think they have their guy in Davis Mills, right?
Well, I like Davis Mills. Look, Deshaun Watson's better than Davis Mills. There's no question about that. But Davis Mills has talent. He's going to be a good quarterback.
All right, so the Texans have a functioning quarterback, and now they're going to have a head coach in Lovie Smith.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.